Okay, so I'm debugging an experimental instance of the IDE. We have our extension running. Technically, my entry point for my tests are on so I put them inside of the GitLab application service and just in the constructor. Literally, I was like, I'm just going to find an entry point for this and see it working. So that's where I've got right now. Literally everything starts when you push a key. So I'm going to press enter. Yeah, here we go. Okay, and it's going to try to initialize the language server. I'm just going to jump through this, and let's look at our console. Yes, it will run a little error here, which is because right now it deserializes this and says, hey, some error got sent back. It was null. Let's go ahead and throw something. It's not breaking anything. It's getting caught and logged. So, but that's something to look at. But I'm also tracing out the requests that were sent. So we sent a request. These were the parameters for initialization. We got back a result. We can see here, this was the ID of the request. So it does like an incremental ID for things and looks for, listens for stuff. So it handles both a request response kind of format as well. So we got back a response that included the capabilities of the language server, and then this returned an error of null. And then I'm going to set the setting with bad token, which, yes, let me run that. And so I sent back a notification of workspace did change configuration. These are the configurations that I sent over. And then I received a notification, not a response, but a separate notification from the language server saying that, hey, for GitLab token check, we got a problem, and these were the problems they found. They failed the token check because there was an unauthorized error. So for me, I went like, success. This is what we needed to see, and we can definitely run this. And yes, I am currently running this in Ultimate, but it does also run in the Community Edition. So we're good to go there. And so I figured from here, this is, and then just to show you logs. I mean, these are really show you everything. That these are the logs you need, but there's also other logging that happens to look at the streams and stuff. But this really gets you everything you need to see that we're communicating back and forth. Everything seems to be really good. So I was going to show you guys what this, what the setup was from working with the firing up a new process, and then also using the library LSP for J. So I'm going to go ahead and stop everything, and because this is super informal, feel free to interrupt at any point if you're like, I got a question or something.
I do have a question, and
Great.
I think it's more on the language server understanding. When we are using the language server for, we said it was Visual Studio that has the same sort of connection. When we were firing up the sub process of the language server, are we? I guess I'm not knowledgeable on why we're sending things back and forth. Like, I understand that sending things back and forth is a good thing, but why are we doing that to solve this problem? And like, what would it do in VS Code where a language server is supported?
So we would still fire things back and forth. And Aaron, feel free to jump in if you feel like I'm not covering something correctly. But the idea is that the language server could be doing things behind the scenes that potentially the editor has no idea of. So for instance, like we're checking the token, or we're running some process on this is way off base, but Aaron, I know you're working like tree sitter and stuff. So it's like we can be doing things like, hey, I'm going to check your dependencies, but it's not a request coming from the editor that, hey, we need to check these things. So, but at some point, the language server could be calling back down to say, hey, we need to notify the user that this thing is wrong, or we need to tell the editor, hey, can you go ahead and give me some information about this? And these might be built into the language server protocol, or like Aaron was saying, there's a couple of things like I'm even using it here, which is let me jump to client service, GitLab local service. We have our GitLab token check. So this is a custom JSON RPC message. It's not part of the language server spec or anything like that, where we want to be able to tell the editor, hey, we've checked your GitLab access token and there's a problem, and we want to notify the user that this is the problem. So it is this kind of like back and forth communication that's a little bit different than like a traditional HTTP kind of, I send a request and I get a response, all within a single session, so to speak. We want to be able to have hey, I'm doing some background work and I don't want you to have to poll. So I want you to be able to just, we can just notify you when something's ready.
Makes sense. Okay, sweet.
Yeah. So that was one of the difficulties with like using a lot of some of the JSON RPC libraries that I saw for Java. They really weren't focused on this bidirectionality, which was something we need for the language server. It was really, we're expecting you to send really basic commands to like very remote procedure call kind of way. So
and I guess
it's a slight, yeah, go ahead.
I was just say a basic way to explain that is like if you think of it like HTTP Py, or I guess what are some of the Java ones like Rusty, like just different like API clients. That's what the like JSON RPC was getting, John. Whereas the new one is actually talk more about a protocol. So hey, this is a protocol that can talk back and forth. So similar to like gRPC, but the LSP specification is another JSON like RPC spec, which is about like the client as an editor invokes the client. And then the server is the language server process that the client starts up, and then it goes back and forth there. And yeah, I think John, you described it pretty well as to what like the potential capabilities of the language server are outside of the spec.
Yeah, and I think that we're going to start growing that language server where we're going to leave the spec pretty heavily. I'd imagine. That's one of the reasons why I didn't want to find something that was just locked down to, hey, yes, we've implemented the language server, but you can't really extend it. And yeah, Dylan, does that answer your question?
Yes, that makes sense. I was missing the why we had this. I knew that why a language server existed, but now it makes sense why we have it. Yes.
Cool. Awesome. So yeah, I figured I'd just kind of jump through, and I did link in that document where I had the proof of concept repo. So all this code's available to come look at and pull down and play with, or rip apart. But I'm probably not gonna, I don't think I'm gonna create an MR with any of this stuff, because I imagine that there's going to be next steps. We'll talk about that at the end of this call. But anyways, yeah, I'll jump through process first, because I really kind of split things up between, one, we need to fire off a process, and two, then we need to create a client off of whatever our input output streams are. So essentially, this could really work with, hey, we've got just a straight old TCP connection, or we later on decided that, yeah, we're gonna host the language server and it's going to be HTTP. That's something that this could technically support. So under language server process, kind of our entry point to this is our ls process, where when it essentially in the constructor or at construction of this object, it does a start on the language server. This may be not how we want to do things, but for this is what it does. What starting a language server does, we can jump into that, is it actually finds, so I bundle the binaries in with the jar. And we may not want to do this because, yes, it makes that jar much larger than, thanks, Aaron, for taking notes. It makes the jar much larger than it really needs to be, because right now I'm actually, just for testing purposes, I am bundling all 3 of our current language server builds, our binaries, and I actually store those in resources. We have resources, LSP binaries, and so I'm on a Windows machine right now, so I'm pointing to the Win x64. But we have our Linux and Mac OS binaries as well. And so right now, what I'm doing is grabbing the binary resource path. That's what actually looks at the OS. And based on what OS you're in, Windows, Linux, Mac, let's pick a different resource path. I actually have a thing for getting what the current operating system is. I'm currently doing that by system get property, doing a very big string based thing. I'm sure there's a better way of doing this. But this was, hey, I can do this quick and dirty and see where we're at. So I'm going to jump back up from get the ls binary resource path, and I have to take it out of the jar in order to execute it. So I create a temp file from it. And then I do a process builder, which is super helpful. And I literally just fire up that process based on its path, giving an argument for, hey, we're going to communicate through stdio, this is something that is built into the language server. Our language server allows, this isn't something anything special on this side. Start the process, return the process. So that's super, super easy. And then I just expose the streams. I have a couple of things underneath here. We've got some utils for like operating system utilities for figuring out what OS we're currently in. I have some resource utils for like doing things like copying from the jar to the temp file and stuff like that. And a couple exceptions because this is me coming from a object-oriented programming paradigm of going, I'm going to create all the things that could go wrong and wrap them in exceptions and stuff like that. So anyways, that's really about it for the process. It's pretty straightforward. I need to just run something. One thing that I did, just so that when we do the start process, I add a shutdown hook, which is something that I'm not like, this is me going, hey, I don't really know Kotlin. And it's been 10 years since I've done Java. I'm thinking this is fine, but we might need to do something that's more OS specific in case, because I'm pretty sure what's going to happen here is that, hey, if the Java runtime is getting shut down, let's go ahead and we can destroy the process. But if someone were to like hard force a process to quit, then the Java runtime wouldn't actually get a chance to do this. So maybe we can do something to call the OS to say, hey, this is a process that's connected to this other process. Right now, I'm not doing that. And I think that we'd have to find something that's cross-platform. So like one of the nice things about our Visual Studio extension is that we only have to support Windows, because Windows is the only OS that supports Visual Studio. So we'll have to, there's a couple of things from a cross-platform perspective that I'm probably missing here. That's about it for the process. Now the client is even simpler, thanks to LSP4j. So I have a client factory, which I have a function called create ls client. It takes in an ls process. But it didn't take in the process. I actually tried to wrap it so we didn't have the whole process as just the streams, just output stream, input stream, error stream. Just because I'm trying to minimize the surface area of our API. Premature optimizations. And the API for the LSP4j allows you to essentially say, hey, they've got a builder style API where the way they think about this. So this is their nomenclature is you have a local service and a remote interface. So your local services are things that you need to handle, things that the language service. So if you're a client, a local service is going to the server has notified us, how do we handle this? So essentially it's handlers. And for remote interfaces, the idea behind this is we don't need a implementation. We just know we're going to call this method, it essentially creates a proxy to an interface. So we don't have an implementation. They'll create the implementation. we run through their proxy. It knows how to serialize based on the class that we have. So for instance, I have this GitLab LS client, which is an interface, which that says this is a function of initialize. These are the params that it takes. And then here's a response. And that's all I need to do to be able to use it as a I don't have to have an implementation. It'll create it because I technically just return that launchers.remote proxy, which gives me a proxy to that GitLab the GitLab LS client. I set some input output streams, and then I tell it to trace all the messages that are coming in and out of the and that's all built into the library. So I didn't do anything special there. And yeah, and so we could do this where it's like it needs a print writer, but we could do we're logging stuff. We could or we don't have to have it at all. So we can do our own logging, and all this can be. We don't have to use the remote proxy. So for instance, if I didn't have the set remote interface or anything like that, I can go launcher.remote endpoint, and now I have an endpoint. Let's just do and then my endpoint has things like notify, and it says, well, what's the method name? What's the parameter that we need to serialize and stuff like that. So we can do it the non-proxy way, the more like, hey, I'm going to build this from scratch and treat this like I'm just going to treat it like a transport almost, or an abstraction of the transport. And but this made it really easy to where all I really needed to do was I have an abstraction directory where I have my GitLab LS client, where I could break these down into, hey, this is the workspace API, and workspace has they have these attributes, JSON segment and JSON notification. So technically, concat those together with a backspace, and that's essentially what it defines. This is our method name that we're going to send over the JSON RPC.
Are those stars, or are they one of the JSON libraries? They don't look like Jackson to me.
Yes, so I think it is. I think it is Jackson. I don't think I don't think this was necessarily built into this library. I think it comes from the serialization library. I can actually see if there's anything. Well, maybe they're just forwarding on stuff. So I could look to see. Yeah.
Yeah. So they build their own annotations.
They built their own. Yeah, they built their own.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, it's and this made it really easy where I could just do this. I have this handler. Am I even using this anymore? Yeah, I am. So this is an interface for what's eventually going to end up being the service so I have an interface for the client notification handler. This has things for Windows show message. I don't even know if we're using Windows show message. Are we, Aaron?
I think there might be a hello world message.
I think that's the only one yeah.
That recently got removed.
Okay, and I think because I remember early on I was able to do it, and then like when I first got here, I remember stuff coming over show message, and then it was gone, and then I went, okay. So I think published diagnostics is what we're using for logging some things. I could be wrong on that, but I do know that we use the GitLab token check for notifying users of token stuff. So and then I implement that interface with whatever I want to do, which right now is I'm just going to send this to the logger, and that's about it. This was really pretty easy to put together once I had the right library, and didn't feel like I needed to write. Like I had started off going down the path of I'm going to just write my own JSON RPC, and that was fine. But then I felt like, okay, yeah, but there are some edge cases, and I don't know if that's what I want to do for a POC right now. I just want to get something working. But the way to integrate this would really be, even if we changed and wrote our own JSON RPC, And we really only need to have some kind of either factory or provider kind of thing that says, hey, get me a client. And then I get back, here's your client, here's things you can call on it. And then we should be able to use it anywhere else in our project. So I'd imagine where we have like our code suggestions and we have like our suggestions provider, instead of calling what we're calling right now, we would just say, hey, language server, give me suggestions. And we'd make sure that everywhere we're, keeping track of text documents change and stuff like that, we're sending that up to the language server as well. So one thing that this client does provide, or the LSP for J does provide, that I'm completely bypassing right now, is and they have a LS client now. Oh boy, maybe it is client. Oh yeah, language client. It's an interface, and it comes with like just all of these JSON requests, workspace, apply edit, client, register capability. And we could very easily just say, hey, let's forward this on as part of our, language client stuff. And then we get kind of all the spec as if it, as the library has interpreted it, we get that without needing to write all this. But it is it's a 100-line file. So it might be easier for us to just say, oh, we're using this, from the spec, great, but we're not using this, so we don't need it. Or, we're using this a little differently, and then we're not tied to their own models. So yeah, that's about it for the demo. I tried to time box this. So I started this probably like Wednesday last week, and kind of got to this point by, real early Friday, and felt like, okay, I'm in a good spot for like showing off what was currently being done, and then kind of wanting to meet back with the broader team of people working on JetBrains and saying, hey, where do we think we should go from here? Does it make sense for me to start actually integrating this into the extension, or does it make sense to start partitioning this work off, maybe making this a little cleaner, and just kind of see what next steps felt like for everybody?
I think I'm gonna leave the next steps to Aaron or others, but I do have a question, and maybe this is a really bad question to be asking at this point. Do we get completions from the language server for the other places where the language? Okay, all right, now, okay, I should have asked that earlier, but now this is making so much more sense.
This is why we want to have, it's like, we don't have to think about re-implementing this stuff. It's like, it's just, we get it for free eventually. And I can't remember the language server, the most recent one does like input debouncing and stuff like that. Does it do that? Oh, it does. Okay. See, like, there's so much code I could start removing from Visual Studio. Yeah, Aaron's like, yes, remove it, get rid of it. There's so much stuff. And yeah, it's going to make it so nice to just, our commits now are going to be just deleting code. So yeah, cool. Yeah, does that answer your question, Dylan?
Yes, that and everything now is making sense. I was a little confused for a second, but yes, that we probably shouldn't have recorded that part. When you go to upload this on YouTube, just cut out that.
We're happy to see your aha moments. We all there's always one person, at least having aha moments, and we want that. Everybody needs aha moments.
Yes.
Good. So
yes.
And it's good for everybody else as well, people that maybe weren't on. Yeah, I guess for next steps, like for me, I think what we did with some of the other editors and the other extensions rather, is we created a epic with different pieces to replace the language server functionality.
Okay.
As well as just the bundling as well. Some of the stuff you mentioned earlier around like, yeah, you're right now you're shipping all 3 executables. Maybe we can figure out like, hey, is there a platform, like, can we either download the executable at runtime from releases on GitLab, or we potentially have like platform specific binaries depending on the packaging. Because I guess is it a jar file? Is that how we like ship the
So
JetBrains?
right now, it's a jar file. I mean, we could do something where we have different builds, and I mean, this is my lack of, you
Okay.
know, there's some lack of knowledge on my side of what's easily possible with the build step.
Yeah, I'm not sure with I guess with like in JetBrains, I'm trying to think when I was a JetBrains user on RubyMine and like even before that IntelliJ.
Yeah.
I don't remember having a huge deal about plugins. Like I and had to install it once, and then I could install it again afterwards and stuff. You know, like it's not something I'm actively installing and looking at the download time and stuff like that. So it may
Yeah.
not be that much of an issue. Obviously, if we're gonna ship it every single time, the binaries every single time, it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
We're gonna be bloating the size. But right now, I don't think this I guess I don't know what the Windows binary looks like, but the size of the other binaries isn't too substantial.
It's like 50 megs, I think.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
and now I do know that, just because I did look in to see what was Copilot doing, as far as, you know, when you get, and this is Visual Studio that I'm thinking of, but yes, they totally bundle the binary directly in it, and they'll bundle every binary that they have. So for instance, if they've got a, you know, the Copilot, you know, if they were going to do this in the jar file, I'm pretty sure it would just be include everything, you know, all together. This is 180 megs. It's not too bad, you know. Maybe it's not too bad. So like that's a really good, you know, spot, and we can iteratively approach that, and, you know, make it easier. Yeah, I like that idea. So the action item here is, let's create an epic. You know, let's talk about, you know, here's how we would break down this work, and then, you know, as people come available to help, you know, contribute to that, we can do that. And yeah, I mean, I do think that if that sounds good, then yeah, we can probably start with, hey, yeah, let's make sure we can have our language server process, and maybe it's not even something we've got a good unit test, but it's not integrated to the rest of the system, and then we can get some eyes on the code as well, because, you know, coming from me, I'm going, yeah, this is the first time I've ever written Kotlin, and I'm pretty sure there's a better way, and I'm, you know, just hacking at it.
Absolutely. I think it definitely makes sense to start getting eyes on the Kaiki. Grab that mop from Mateo. Mateo has moved around with the electric mop.
Nice.
Okay. Kai says no, he can't, and he started saying no, he can't over and over. So yeah. So, but yeah, like I think if we got like the epic, like we started the epic with like looking at, say, inline completion, like this week, like there's been so many improvements to inline completion around intent with tree sitter, as well as streaming. We're adding streaming support into inline completion as well. So if you're a language that's supported by with our tree sitter API, and I do a scan of your file and say, hey, it looks like you're trying to do code generation, then we'll trigger doing streaming instead of doing like just the like request response. So when the starts, like that is additional feature as well. Like that's additional coverage as well, which that's gonna be something that each editor will have to implement separately, you know, like that streaming thing. But that is just the fact that streaming is there, and you get it for sort of like you have to there's two proposals right now for what that will look like. But essentially be like you start the request, and if you get a response back with a certain amount of data, the editor should wait for the stream. Or there's like another proposal that says, hey, first the editor has to ask for, hey, do you can you give me a stream for this? And if that's the case, so in either case, though, what it'll be is implementing the inline completion. We can just move that implementation over to using language server, and then as an incremental improvement, then on top of that, we can add in saying, hey, now JetBrains, we can declare that JetBrains supports streaming. So just like we do with VS Code, we'll be able to stream responses into it. Granted, for VS Code, it was actually we were sort of like working around APIs to do streaming, so we might have to do something similar in JetBrains, but it should see the capability goes.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds awesome. Yeah, I think that makes sense. So, I mean, I will probably I will write up this epic, send it to Francois to kind of give a look over, and I think like Dylan, I hadn't looked to see how long Ali's out, but he's out till like the end of the year, right?
Yeah, he's out until the 2nd, I think, or the
Okay.
3rd. Yeah.
Yeah, I doubt we get any traction on this over the next, till after the new year. But at least I can get this epic out and people can look at it, and I'll leave this code probably as is, and I'll jump back to some Visual Studio stuff. And yeah, I'll just ask for like people feel free to contribute to that epic as well. So I don't know if at the moment I don't know if anyone's like really owning this this initiative. But I know with Visual Studio it's been slow. Like Aaron, I know that you approved that MR, but it's like I'm still kind of waiting on Mike. So I think, and that's just part of the year, and I know that he's super busy. So I probably have a little more free time to look into this stuff too. So I don't know, maybe I'll own some of the movement on this. Cool. Yeah, any other things that people want to discuss? Thank you guys so much for sticking around later than and for all the technical difficulties I had earlier.
Oh, thanks for the demo. This was